Bulldog is still there. On the hood of a modern Mack truck, it still leans forward in chrome, small enough to fit in one hand, familiar enough that many Americans have seen it on a highway, at a construction site, on a snowplow, or on a dump truck waiting at a red light. At its height, the old Mack plant in Allentown, Pennsylvania, was described as a 47-acre factory complex, turning out as many as 135 trucks a day. That was not just a logo on a grill. Behind it were foundry workers, assembly lines, union jobs, machine shops, rail access suppliers, and families whose paychecks came from the same industrial rhythm. Then the numbers changed. A truck that could survive punishment still had to answer to fuel bills, repair time parts inventory, and cost per mile. The story of Mack Trucks is not simply about a famous American brand falling behind. It is about what happens when a promise built on toughness enters a world that starts measuring every mile. In 1893, John Mack and his brother Augustus opened a small wagon repair business in Brooklyn at 716 Columbia Street. The building had been a stable before it became a workshop. The work that came through the door was not theoretical. Wagons broke, wheels split, axles bent under loads they were never meant to carry. Horses pulled through streets that were crowded, uneven, and hard on anything made of wood and iron. For Mack, the first business was not selling a dream of transportation. It was keeping other people's equipment working long enough to finish the day. That mattered. A brewery did not need a wagon that looked modern. It needed one that could carry barrels without cracking. A construction company did not need elegance. It needed a frame that could survive bad roads, heavy lumber, and repeated abuse. So the early Mack habit was simple: find the weak point, make it stronger, and send it back into work. When gasoline engines began appearing at the edge of American transportation, Mack did not enter that world as a polished automobile company. It entered as a repair shop trying to solve a load problem. The first experiments were rough. An engine could seize, a belt could snap, a machine could move a short distance, fail, and force the men around it to take it apart by hand. But those failures gave the company something useful. They showed which parts could not survive real use. By the 1900 Brooklyn was too crowded for what Mack was becoming. The company needed more floor space, better access to materials, and a place where a truck builder could grow without being squeezed by the city around it. Allentown, Pennsylvania offered land rail access nearby coal and steel, and workers who understood heat metal and machinery. In 1905, production began there. Only a small number of trucks came out at first. But the move changed the company. Mack was no longer only fixing machines after they failed. It was building machines around the expectation that failure would come unless the truck was made strong enough from the beginning. That was the world that made toughness the right answer. Before fuel efficiency became the hasty, the argument before fleet buyers measured every hour of downtime. Mack learned its first lesson from broken wheels and overloaded streets and machines that had to go back to work the next morning. In 1914, the test was no longer a broken wagon in Brooklyn or a small order from a local customer. It was war. The British Army needed trucks that could move supplies, artillery, and men through roads that often stopped being roads at all. Mud could swallow wheels. Loads could exceed what any manufacturer recommended. Drivers could be inexperienced. Maintenance could be delayed because the next trip mattered more than the repair schedule. Mack Trucks kept working in those conditions often enough for the reputation to travel faster than the trucks themselves. The company's strength became easier to explain because soldiers' contractors, city departments, and haulers could see it in use. A truck either made the route or it did not. A frame either held or it cracked. An engine either came back running or it came back as a problem for the shop. By the end of the First World War, Mack had more than a product. It had proof. After the war, that proof moved into civilian life. Construction companies needed trucks for stone, lumber, sand, and concrete. Cities needed vehicles for sanitation, fire departments, and road work. Haulers needed machines that could run long days on roads still rough enough to punish weak parts. Mack's answer fit that world. The trucks were not delicate. They were not designed around comfort first. They were built for weight, impact, and use that did not always respect the brochure. Through the 1920 as road building expanded and freight began moving farther by truck, that kind of machine had a natural place in the American economy. The AC model became associated with heavy work. The Bulldog on the hood was no longer only a mark of identity. It pointed to a working expectation this truck would take the load and come back. Then came another war and another expansion. During the Second World War, Mack produced military vehicles for Allied use, from cargo trucks to recovery vehicles. The factory had to meet volume schedule, material demand, and military specification at the same time. Steel labor engines, tires, and floor space all became part of the same pressure. Allentown grew around that pressure. By the post-war years, the plant had become a large, physical machine in its own right. Buildings spread across the property. A foundry cast heavy parts. Assembly lines pulled frames, engines, transmissions, axles, and cabs into finished vehicles. The work supported paychecks, neighborhoods, local shops, and families that planned their lives around shifts. In the 1950, the timing was almost perfect. America was building highways. Suburbs were expanding. Construction moved dirt, concrete, pipe, and steel across the country. Freight that once depended more heavily on rail increasingly moved by truck. A company known for hard-working vehicles stood in the middle of that demand. At its peak, the Allentown complex was described as covering 47 acres and 23 buildings. The foundry alone employed more than 1,000 workers. The line could produce up to 135 trucks a day. For a while, the old promise and the American road wanted the same thing. A truck that could endure punishment. A factory that could build it at scale. A city that could live from the work. But the same highways that helped Mack grow were also changing the job. Smooth pavement, long-distance fleets, and rising operating costs would slowly change what customers expected from a truck. The Bulldog had been rewarded by rough roads. The next test would come from the numbers behind the wheel. In 1973, the problem arrived through a fuel pump. Diesel prices rose, trucking companies watched operating costs climb, and every mile began to carry a sharper number. For a fleet owner, the truck was no longer judged only by whether it could take a beating. It was judged by how much it cost to keep moving. A Mack truck could still do hard work. But now the buyer was looking at fuel records, repair hours, parts inventory, driver downtime, and resale value. A truck that lasted for years could still become expensive if it burned more fuel, needed more shop time, or forced a company to keep too many parts on the shelf. That changed the conversation. In the old world, Mack's reputation had been easy to defend. A contractor could point to a truck that survived a quarry road. A city department could point to a fire truck or a sanitation truck that came back from another shift. The proof was physical. In the new world, the proof was also numerical. If one truck averaged around 8 miles per gallon and another could reach 11 or 12, the difference did not stay small for long. Over tens of thousands of miles, fuel became a line on the ledger that no purchasing manager could ignore. European manufacturers understood that opening. Mercedes-Benz, Volvo, and Scania entered in the American market in small numbers at first. Their trucks did not always look like the machines American haulers were used to, but some fleet operators noticed what they offered: quieter cabins, better fuel economy, standardized parts, and lower maintenance costs over time. The threat was not that Mack suddenly forgot how to build strong trucks. The threat was that strength had become only one part of the calculation. A buyer responsible for 50 trucks did not ask the same question as a man buying one machine for a construction yard. He had to ask how often each truck would be in the shop, how many spare parts had to be stocked, how much fuel the fleet would burn in a year, how much the trucks would be worth when they were sold. Mack responded. It worked on more efficient engines. It tried to improve what had made the brand famous without surrendering the heavy-duty reputation that customers still recognized. But the customer had already started counting in a different way. The old truck could still pull the load. The harder question was whether it could pull the numbers. By the 1,980, many truck buyers were no longer thinking like single machine owners. A construction company might still care about whether one dump truck could take years of abuse, but a large fleet had a different problem. It had dozens, sometimes hundreds of vehicles to buy, service, rotate, replace, and eventually sell. The question was no longer only, will this truck last? It was also, how predictable is the cost? A fleet manager needed trucks that shared parts across models. Mechanics needed repairs they could repeat quickly. Purchasing departments wanted fewer surprises. Drivers wanted cabs that were easier to live in for long stretches of highway. A truck that was strong but costly to operate could lose ground to a truck that was slightly less legendary but easier to manage across an entire fleet. That change opened space for competitors. Freightliner pushed hard into fleet sales with price and efficiency. Peterbilt and Kenworth held ground with owner-operators who wanted premium trucks, identity, and customization. European manufacturers brought another kind of pressure fuel economy, driver comfort, and maintenance discipline built into the design. Mack was still respected. But respect did not automatically decide the purchase order. The company was now being pulled from several directions at once. If it chased fleet buyers, it had to compete on operating cost. If it chased premium buyers, it had to compete on image, comfort, and customization. If it stayed with the old heavy-duty promise, it risked serving a customer who was becoming smaller as a share of the industry. In 1977, Mack entered a partnership with Renault. On paper, the deal answered a real need. Renault could bring access to European diesel technology and a different engineering base. Mack could offer an American dealer network and a known name in heavy trucks. The partnership was not simply a takeover story at the beginning. It was also an admission that the old truck maker needed outside help to meet a changing market. The E6 engine showed the direction. Better fuel economy mattered. Better efficiency mattered. The company was trying to translate its old reputation into a new set of requirements. But partnerships change more than products. As Renault increased its stake, Mack's decisions no longer belonged entirely to the places that had built the company. The old center of gravity began to move. The customer was changing. The competitors were changing. Now the ownership structure was changing too. By the mid-1980, Mack's market share had fallen far from its earlier peak, and Renault controlled a majority stake. The pressure that began at the fuel pump had reached the boardroom. A factory town can live with hard years. It can live with slower shifts, fewer orders, and arguments at the bargaining table. But it becomes more vulnerable when the final decision is no longer made inside the same industrial world that depends on it. Beat. For Allentown, that was the next crack. The truck still carried the Bulldog. The question was, who now controlled the road ahead? In November 1987, the pressure reached the old plant in Allentown. By then, the factory was no longer being judged only by what it had built or how long it had served the company. It was being measured by space movement, labor cost, maintenance, and output. The same kind of calculation that had changed the truck market was now being applied to the place that made the trucks. The Allentown complex had grown over decades. Buildings had been added when the company needed more room. Departments had expanded where land and production allowed. What had once been a sign of strength now made the plant harder to modernize. A chassis could move through multiple buildings before becoming a finished truck. Materials had to travel across an old industrial layout. Maintenance costs kept rising. Union wages and benefits negotiated in stronger years now sat inside a company trying to compete against newer plants, cheaper locations, and more automated production. Renault looked at Allentown and saw a factory that no longer fit the numbers. The reported efficiency gap was sharp. The plant was described as operating well below comparable modern facilities with millions of dollars in maintenance, needed just to keep it running safely. For workers in Allentown, those numbers were not abstract. They meant a shift could disappear, a department could close. A son might not get the same job his father once held. The company announced that final assembly would be phased out and moved to a newer facility in South Carolina. Local officials tried to respond. The union offered concessions. The city wanted to keep the work, but the decision had already moved beyond the old factory town. On June 28, 1990, the last truck rolled off the Allentown assembly line. It was a red DM dump truck signed by workers from the final shift. Thousands came to watch it leave. The truck still carried the name, but final assembly, the work that had once tied Mack to Allentown day after day, was gone. A factory that had been built to answer load distance and punishment had met a different test. This time the question was cost. Today, Mack Trucks still exists. The name is still on the road. The Bulldog is still mounted on the hood. A modern Mack plant operates in Macungie, Pennsylvania, only about 10 miles from the old Allentown site. The trucks are still real machines built for real work, but the world behind them is different. The modern plant is cleaner, more efficient, and shaped by a global owner. Volvo Group now sits behind the brand. Engineering, production, planning, automation, and corporate priorities belong to a wider network than the old Pennsylvania factory town ever knew. In Allentown, the old complex no longer holds the same place in daily life. Parts of the site were demolished. Some memory remains in photographs, street names, old workers' stories, and the Mack Trucks Historical Museum. A city can keep the evidence after the work has moved on. A badge, a truck, a factory address, a story told by someone who still remembers the shift change. Mack did not disappear. That is what makes the story harder. The product continued. The name continued. The Bulldog continued. But the old arrangement behind it, the foundry, the assembly line, the local paychecks the city built around the work, no longer carried the same weight. The promise had not vanished. It had been moved into another calculation. A modern Mack truck can still pass on the highway with the Bulldog leaning forward on its hood. Behind it, Allentown is no longer the machine. The Chrome Dog remains.